So I think that the next one for them is probably going to be a leverage reliever, right? You can't have enough bullpen and everything that we see in the postseason, how much they value. I think that's going to be one of the next areas of focus. Then they're also going to look to add a bat, ideally an infielder, and obviously Bo Bichette fits into that range there. But again, because they do have some flexibility on the roster from a defensive alignment standpoint, they can do different things and they can pursue an outfielder if they so wanted. Finally, I think they're just going to keep on trying to add pitching. Right, they can again be creative in a number of different ways. You just never have enough pitching. As much as teams have, it's such a cliche, but as much as teams have, you get into the season, it always turns out that it's not enough. And so, is it? Can they add a swing man? Do they add two relievers? Do they maybe go find another starter even? I think there are just ways for them to further build out their pitching and be something that they still want to do.
Shire, when you say leverage reliever, are we talking Edwin Diaz? Are we talking someone like that, like a big name, Robert Suarez possibly? Or are we talking more if you kind of fall down the list a little bit? Not that these guys are terrible, but a Pete Fairbanks, a Emilio Pagan, a Luke Weaver that or coming a little bit cheaper than the big name Diaz, Suarez, even Devin Williams. I'll throw in there as the big name guys. Are they looking at someone like that, or are they going to try and maybe add two or three of the lower end people?
Yes. So
Yes to all
I
of
just
them.
put it
So Edwin
all of the
Diaz is
above.
signing with the Blue
I,
Jays. Edwin Diaz
no,
to the
I
Blue
think that
Jays. Shi
looks.
Davidi just reported. Yes.
Not quite, AJ. I think you might be taking some creative license there, but I think they're open to all the different possibilities. Like if something with Diaz was to work out and it fit within their valuations, then I think they would explore that. And if it's something else, well, they still have Jeff Hoffman and Jimmy Garcia. Then they're pairing another eighth inning arm that gets swing and miss. Like I think the bottom line is they're going to look for they're going to look at all the different possibilities. It is what they do, and it's why they get connected to everybody. But they're going to look for somebody who gets some swing and miss, ideally someone who is somewhat platoon proof, and you can throw them in there against lefties and or righties, and someone who has some experience in the back end of a game. Now, is that eighth inning, ninth inning? Look, I don't think they're going to rule anything out. I really do think they're just chasing wins at this point and trying to get as much value, as much talent on their roster as they can. But the thing that, like starting like last offseason, one of the points of priority that they made with their relievers was to just get guys who get more swing and miss or more velocity into their bullpen. And I think that that's been borne out in the type of pickups that they've made. Even if you go back to last year at the deadline when it was Dominguez and Varland who were their pickups there, those are two guys who both have big velocity and both get a lot of swing and miss. So I'd expect the Blue Jays to examine every element of that market, to continue examining every element of that market, and whatever ends up working out ends up working out.
Blue Jays are seriously in the mix for pretty much everybody, is what I hear from Shi Davidi. So we're going to go to the bat. We're going to go to the bat, preferably an infielder. Is that preferably an infielder if it's Bo Bichette? And if it's not, is it elsewhere? Because Alex Bregman plays a really good third base. And the opening at third allows Barger to play right field, which obviously there's a Tucker talk and there's a lot of shifting around. But if it's not Bo Bichette, is that bat going to be an infielder?
Not necessarily, but it could be, right? And I think that's going back to what I said about the Blue Jays could add in a number of different ways. Because of Addison Barger being able to move around and Ernie Clement being able to move around and having Springer able to be at DH and in the outfield, the same with Santander, the Blue Jays can just do a lot of different things. And they can go for what ends up being the best fit. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to get someone on the super high end if Bo Bichette ends up leaving the club, but they can examine all the different options that are there. I think that just from the way that they're set up, I think it makes sense for them to probably get an infielder, uh, probably one who can play second base because you can put him in as a shortstop, and that looked pretty good for the 2 months we saw it in September and October. But they can just play with the opportunity based on the way that they can move their existing pieces around the diamond.
Should the Blue Jays next year with Louis Varland have the little thing that Fox had for Shohei Ohtani? He's due up in 3 innings. It'll be like Louis Varland will be warming up, because is he warming up officially right now in the offseason? And has anyone confirmed that he can wipe his butt at this point in the offseason? After all the innings he threw in the postseason, how many times he was up? That dude was unbelievable for them.
It was incredible. And, just in talking to him, he was just like, I can just keep going. Look, he'll obviously be managed differently over the course of 162, but they were certainly attracted to his durability. And the fact that he showed that he could do that will obviously impact the way the Blue Jays handle him, because they will want to use him a fair bit during the regular season, assuming they will try to find ways to ensure he can still do something like that again in the postseason, should the Blue Jays make it next season as well. But it was really remarkable. There has been some loose conversation about whether or not he gets stretched out a little bit next spring, and whether that's something they look at. I don't know that there's any definitive conclusion whether they're going to go that route or not at this point. But they've kicked around a lot of different things with Louis Varland, and at minimum, they know they've got a very durable and reliable piece for their bullpen mix.
When you said pitching depth as your third point on your to-do list, do they look at it as, okay, Chris Bassitt gave us below a 4 ERA, he gave us 31 starts during the year, and he was a piece out of our bullpen. A big piece in the playoffs, but a piece out of the bullpen. So do they look at that pitching depth as something that, okay, it's important, but it's not that important? It's not a Tatsuya Mai type of important. Or is it the whole spectrum of where they're looking for pitching depth? Kind of like you talked about the leverage reliever.
Yeah, so I don't think it's maybe necessarily on the high end, unless they do something else with their staff. I mean, but Chris Bassett to me is interesting. He's a guy who definitely deserves a spot in a rotation. What he did out of the bullpen, I think, created some interest in what that would look like full time if he was a reliever, and how versatile a pitcher he is. I don't think he's the type of guy who would want to bounce back between the roles, go starter, reliever, back and forth as a swingman. But maybe potentially he's open to something like that. He was obviously super important to that clubhouse. He was really tied to, in a lot of way, the artery system of that team, where he was just a central part of almost everything that was happening there. But is there enough opportunity for him with the Blue Jays compared to what he might do with other clubs? Good question. But I think ultimately the Blue Jays just want to find innings. Finding a minor league free agent like an Eric Lauer who can come up and emerge at a key point in the season when your depth is really being tested. I think that's important. The Blue Jays do have some more internal pieces, be it someone like Bowden Francis this year, who was trending towards health towards the end of the season when he ran out of runway and should be ready to go next spring. There's a Ricky Tiedemann who's coming back from Tommy John surgery and should be ready to go as well. And he was one of the top prospects, not only in the Blue Jays system, but he was a consensus top 100 prospect as well, before he got hurt. So they do have some depth, but I think they'll try to just keep finding ways to add, be it on the major league roster or on the minor league side, that builds out the depth that they have.
Sure. You're mentioning his depth. One of their big pieces last year was Max Scherzer. Have you heard if he's pitching next year? Do we know anything about his future and what he's going to do? Because he performed well in the postseason for him. So, are there any talks maybe of a reunion, or have we even heard if he's going to pitch next year?
Yeah, I mean, he's going to pitch, and he basically said it just after the season, and then reiterated that in some comments to Ken Rosenthal after. But I think in terms of the Blue Jays, I'm interested to kind of see where that goes, and how that fit is there. Max Scherzer at this point, depending on health, is he a guy you can count on to go wire to wire, or are there going to be some things that that crop up, in ways that you have to keep them healthy. Uh, and does that fit with what the Blue Jays are doing? Do they, again, have enough opportunity? As things stand right now, the Blue Jays have five starters in their rotation, and maybe there's some movement, some way, shape, or form that creates an opening, but they're sort of full there. Does Max want sort of uh, a part-time role, or want to wait for an opportunity, or is he going to go to a team where they have a spot more open for him? I think those are all fair questions. So I think there was a lot of appreciation for Max Scherzer, not only what he did on the field, but the way that he contributed in the clubhouse on a number of levels, the types of conversations that he had with front office people in terms of their game planning and information, and the way that they assessed other players and planned, and all things of those natures. There was a lot of appreciation for that. He very much appreciated his experience with the Blue Jays. So there's a two-way element to that, but does that necessarily mean there's going to be a reunion? I don't know at this point. I still think that before that, there are some things that would happen before that ends up taking place.
So I may or may not see Max on Wednesday. So can I tell him that Shi Davidi said there's no chance he comes back to the Blue Jays?
I mean, I'd prefer that you didn't, because I don't want him to throw something at me the next time I see him. Uh, But look, I mean, I think with the way that he pitched in the postseason, I mean, he's cemented a place of appreciation with Blue Jays fans for who'll remember those contributions, especially that game in Seattle. That was something that it won't be soon forgotten. So I think that's pretty cool. And I think, like, look, we'll see where this Blue Jays offseason goes. And I I think it's still at the beginning as opposed to the end of it, even with such a major move as the cease agreement. But I do think there's more to come. We'll see how much variation there is to the rest of the roster, what kind of changes or further additions are made, and then maybe there is a reunion in the offing down the road.
Do we have to make sure that we're not blinded by their fact that they made it to Game 7 of the World Series? That when we evaluate what Ross Atkins has done for this team, I've been one of the biggest detractors of any. Like, I was not a Ross Atkins fan. The moves he made, the fact that he was getting rid of guys and not re-signing guys, and I felt like the losses kind of fell on him. Now, this past offseason, they went out and got Scherzer, like you talked about, Santander, and really Santander was the big move, and he didn't play much. So was this really a positive season for Ross Atkins because the players played well, or because Ross Atkins made a lot of really good moves?
Well, I mean, it always comes down to the players, right? Like the players, as much as front offices can do. It once they're between the lines, it's all dependent on the players. But I don't think you can kind of look at you can't divorce last season from what the Blue Jays had done over multiple years to get to that point. And I think that's the conclusion that Mark Shapiro had reached, was that 24 went about as horribly as it could have gone, but 24 being as bad as it wasn't fully reflective of some of the good work that had been done in advance of that, and that 24 was an aberration. And I think there was certainly cause for concern with the way that the window was framing up, that Vladimir Guerrero Jr. didn't get done. And this may be narrative, but I do know some people who think that the Guerrero Jr. extension last April, and just removing that as an issue, and definitively setting the Blue Jays window as, like, this is a team that's going to keep competing. This is a team that's going to build around a cornerstone like Guerrero. I think that was ended up being a factor, because when they got off to the slow start and were having some issues, it wasn't like everyone was thinking, okay, they're going to blow this up in a second, right? Whereas if Guerrero hadn't signed, then that would have been a conversation around it. And so I think all those things end up being part of the Ross Atkins ledger. And so when you put talented players together, and then you find a way to help them be successful. And that's sort of the less discussed part of the Blue Jays season, which is some of the changes that they made to their game planning and the way that they distribute information in their players and some of the conversations around how they attack different things, the evolutions there, from even defensive positioning, pitch recommendations, all those different types of things. Like that is all part of what the Blue Jays did last year. And so if you look at it as they had learned some very, very hard lessons in 2024, but then applied them in 25 and made the best out of a bad year, I think that you have to give everybody some credit. And that includes manager John Schneider, includes GM Ross Atkins. I mean, if you're going to blame them for 24, you can't not credit them for 25.
Well, that was going to be my question. Is John Schneider officially off the hot seat now? Because going into the year, everyone was like, oh, he's going to be the first one fired. And then they got off to the terrible start. And everyone's like, man, everyone's looking at their watch going, okay, is there going to be a press conference today at 2:00 saying John Schneider's been relieved of duty? And next thing you know, he's got him to the Game 7 of the World Series. So is he officially off the hot seat?
Yeah, I mean, it may be done already, or if it's not done yet, it's going to be done soon. There'll be an extension for him, and an extension for Mark Shapiro as well. So I think all that hot seat stuff that disappeared probably around last June or so when the team turned the corner and then didn't let up. And so, John Schneider actually deserves a ton of credit. And there was a very strong case for him to be manager of the year in the American League. Some people around the team were quite frustrated that it didn't happen for him at that point in time. But, the type of work that the Blue Jays did in transforming themselves out of 24 into the group that went into 25, a lot of that lands on him, and he was very deliberate in the offseason. A lot of it was player driven, but it was running through him. And I think that anybody questioning sort of his future sort of didn't watch what happened last year, right? And so I think that'll probably be resolved fairly soon. Same with Shapiro. This is a team that has some stability, that's valued continuity, and is poised to continue with that at two of the key leadership spots.